Hey everyone, and welcome back. Okay, this is something I'm dead excited for because this is the Hunter class review, the first in that series, because over the next while, we're going to go through every class in World of Warcraft. And what I love about this series is you're going to learn basically how to play each class, each spec, where they're good, where they're bad, what is fun, what's not fun, and what's up with the Shadowlands specific things like the legendaries and the covenants. So if you enjoyed our Legion class review, and it seems like a load of people did back then yeah, this is the big leveled up version of that series for the Shadowlands expansion. So watch this series and you will have, when you leave, a broad, solid understanding sort of just how the game's classes work. Plus, if you are considering swapping mains, or maybe leveling a new alt, or just understanding what your guildmates are doing, then this is going to really help you too. Okay, with that said, let's get going. First up, Beast Mastery. It's funny because while it's extremely punishing for failing its core mechanic, dropping your frenzy stacks, it is easier to play, and you know what, especially too in realistic scenarios. It's the one spec in the game that can do absolutely everything while it is moving, right? The one range that can do that. And that does make it perfect for handling raid assignments, and a great pick for players who maybe tend to get a bit overwhelmed when they've got a whole bunch of stuff to do and raid assignments. Now, fun is subjective, and I think it's fair to say that BM, even with that, is not especially fun. I do, though, think that it happens to mesh generally well with the gameplay scenarios of World of Warcraft. And for the Shadowlands specific stuff, essentially Blizzard took a if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of approach. So, with that said, how does Beast Mastery play? Okay, so it all comes from using Bestial Wrath, your kind of important cooldown, well, with Kill Command and Cobra Shot. That's really the core of it. Now, the real principle here is just, get as many kill commands squeezed into your Bestial Wrath cooldown window as you can. Then Cobra Shot, while it's kind of a focus, sort of filler spender, it does actually make up quite a bit of your damage, so it's important too. But there is more because we've got Barbed Shot. And this is something that people don't find mega intuitive, but basically Barbed Shot puts a bleed in your target and also gives your pet a stack of Frenzy. Now, Frenzy is a buff that can stack up to 3 times, and basically it's super important. Now, the duration of Frenzy is the same as the Barbed Shot bleed, so essentially you want to refresh Barbed Shot as late as you can and ensure that your pet is frenzied for as many stacks as long as is possible. Now, each Barbed Shot will decrease the cooldown of Bestial Wrath, so you can just sort of see how these sort of gameplay loops tie together. Really though, there's 2 ways to mess up this spec. Number 1, dumping so much focus into Cobra Shot that you can't cast Kill Command, and second, letting Frenzy fall off your pet by not getting the most out of Barbed Shot. Now, sometimes your Wild Call procs, with Wild Call being a mechanic where your auto shots can just reset the cooldown of Barbed Shot, sometimes the RNG there is just really unlucky. So you might want to do a Barbed Shot, but it's on cooldown, and Wild Call just ain't proccing for you, and therefore the buff falls off, and you feel bad. And because of this being a thing that can happen, many players go with the Scent of Blood talent, which gives you 2 charges of Barbed Shot whenever you do a Bestial Wrath, because that really does just help you maintain your Frenzy stacks for longer. Now, as you get more haste, you'll be doing more auto shots, and that's just going to mean that you'll get more Wild Call procs, and that essentially will smooth out this aspect of the BM Hunter. But basically, use your focus well, keep up your Barbed Shots, you'll find success. And then, of course, for AoE, just throw in a multi-shot every 4 seconds, which will ensure that Beast Cleave, which makes your pet do AoE, is maintained. That's essentially the core of the Beast Mastery Hunter. So jumping into talents for me is a flat-ish experience. The likes of, Murder of Crows and Barrage, to me they sometimes feel, they can be fun, but they're just a bit bolted on, really. I don't think they mesh fantastically with the rest of the spec, and realistically, you just end up going with a whole bunch of boring passives. Now, there is Bloodshed, right? That's an active one, which will give you a little bit more. It's a 1-minute cooldown, and it's a sort of, basically just a damage window mechanic. There's that. There is also the one where your Cobra Shot resets the cooldown of Kill Command when you're in Bestial Wrath, which can be a bit of a fun, crazy pace to play with. But overall, I would say that there's not super cool defining talent builds of BM that to me feel overly transformative or extremely fun. Now, that could be an extrapolation of a general, to me, on-rails feeling that this spec has got, which just means that both the core gameplay and also the talents never feel mega exciting to me. So I think this could just be general critiques of a spec that is, I would say, not extremely fun to play, but just meshes so well with World of Warcraft that it just fits well and you rarely begrudge playing it when you're actually just out there doing stuff with your guild. Okay, let's talk about legendaries. I think they're a mixed bag. So you've got Dire Command and Rylic Stalker's Piercing Fangs, which are just boring. I mean, they can be good enough, but they're just boring to me. There's one that gives Cobra Shot a chance to make your next kill command be free, so that's kind of neat, not super thrilling. Though Eriduan War Order's cooldown reduction mechanic is a bit more interesting. So the thing, though, is that right now, the one that people are actually using is Soulforge Embers. That's a general Hunter Lego that is currently BIS. Now, some find it kind of annoying to use, but I actually do like it if I'm using this macro, which just puts it all in one button. What it does is it makes it so that firing a flare onto a tar trap will make it explode, and that does a dot. Now, to me, that's really nice in Mythic Plus, but some people find it to be quite clunky. Now, there is another one that does, I think, could actually feel neat. It gives you 45 focus and 100% focus gain for 5 seconds whenever a trap is triggered. I think that's actually kind of cool, but it's not really used, so it's not too relevant. So really, as it stands, you're either going to be using Soulforge Embers or a boring enough passive legendary, which I don't think is the most exciting state of affairs for the BM Hunter. Okay, so for strengths and weaknesses, these are incredible in high movement situations, and you know what, they're also nice when you just kind of want a nice, big, flat, consistent damage profile. And then being a hunter, their mobility is just excellent, as is much of their utility, you know? They've got Binding Shot, they've got Interrupt, they've got a direct stun, they've got Feign Death, they can even provide Heroism to their group. You know, there's a bunch there. As for weaknesses, I mean, bar their currently middling damage, it's hard to think of any. Maybe you could say that, well, they don't do incredible sort of priority burst damage, so there's that. But otherwise, they just fit WoW so well. That's the thing here, right? They're truly the envy of every other ranged whenever there's a high movement situation. So it's just that thing where they mesh really well with all of the game's content. You're rarely there feeling like you are fighting your spec to actually play the content you're trying to play. So it's just a pretty frictionless WoW experience, I would say. Now, that said, there are downsides. For me, Bestial Wrath being the global cooldown just feels really bad, so I don't like that. I think the RNG of Wild Call can be quite frustrating as well. Pet AI can get you sometimes. I think Aspect of the Wild, which is technically their main damage cooldown outside of Bestial Wrath, there's a reason I haven't even bothered to mention it thus far in the video. It's really not that impactful, not that fun. I mean, it does reduce your GCD, which is what's kind of nice about it, but I think it could be more hype. Then I suppose the other thing for me, and this is the big thing for me, the core of playing well is not using too many Cobra shots and not using barbed shot wrong. There's very little to the core of doing super well with them, which is like you aggressively seizing more within a fight. It can feel a little bit on rails. Now, it meshes with content really well, and I think it's a great pick for many, many people, but there will be people who just won't be satisfied by how it plays in the long term. And for them, perhaps Marksmanship is the answer, so let's talk about that. I have to level with you. I hated the Hunter rework when I first tried it in BFA. I didn't really like it in Shadowlands Alpha either. But Blizzard then tweaked up some values. They changed a major pain point, they made their main cooldown feel far better to use, and while I still cringe at my own gameplay because I'm a newbie at it, I literally swapped to this like an hour before our first raid night, I am actually finding satisfaction with and the process of trying to squeeze out more, you know, from it. So I'm having fun here. Now, a word of caution, currently the balancing has this being a flavor of the month spec. Do expect it to be nerfed, and generally make your gameplay decisions based on something that you will find enjoyable and fun to play on the long term. You would rather be upper quintile of performance of a spec that you can stick with for a long time than be average performance for the flavor of the month. Okay, let's talk about how it plays. So aim shot is your big damage dealer. It's got 2 charges and it's just a hard cast, and you can't do that cast when you're moving. So that generally means that the focus of the spec is to ensure you never cap 2 charges of aim shot and you just have enough focus to use it when you want to. Now, whenever you cast an aim shot, you will generate between 1 and 2 stacks of precise shots, and that's a buff that basically just makes your next multi-shot or arcane shot more powerful. So generally, your flow of gameplay is just to do an aim shot and then to use your precise shot stacks, and then to, well, use another aim shot, or maybe try to get some focus back using rapid fire, which you always want to keep on cooldown, or steady shot, which is your filler generator. Rapid fire is just that. You know, it's an on-the-move channeled ability that generates focus and does some nice damage. And things, though, with this spec, they really kick into gear with AoE. This is what's awesome. This is where you find the fun. AoE is done via a mechanic called trick shots that's just awesome. So if your multi-shot hits 3+ targets, then your next aimed shot or rapid fire will ricochet about the place. Now this results in some serious fun because, you know, you go multi-shot, aim shot, multi-shot, rapid fire, and your screen explodes in numbers. It's satisfying. And it's the thing where it's aggressive. You know, you identify where you can do a trick shot, then you do your trick shot and you get a whole bunch of damage as a reward. To me, that's more exciting than just being like, oh yeah, gotta keep Beast Cleave up. So yeah, there's then True Shot. That's a big Shadowlands change. So True Shot is still, you know, your 2-minute duration, or 2-minute cooldown, you know, big CD for the spec. It reduces now, though, the cooldown of aim shot and rapid fire by 50%, and it increases your focus regenerate by 50%, and that's all for 15 seconds. Now, the older version, to make it quick, was just way more boring, less interesting. This one, though, is just a big BAM pace increase. Feels really fast to play. And you see when you can mix that in with weaving in your multi-shots so you can get your trick shots off while you're doing this for extreme AoE damage, man, it is so satisfying. Then the other big change, Hunter's Mark. So it used to be in the past, you just have to put Hunter's Mark on a target before you attacked it. So that meant you always had to incur this really boring GCD before you could get going. And for many people, that sucked the fun and sucked the pace out of playing this, especially in a target swapping scenario. But Blizzard have removed the damage component from Hunter's Mark, meaning that that bit of suck that just followed this spec around for so long, it's no longer there. So that's essentially it, you know? There's a simple core, there have been really good changes and nice tweaks to things like focus values that overall have improved the flow. Okay, now that you know how it plays, let's talk about the talents. Honestly, for me, talents is where things just get less hype, and that's mostly because I think there's wasted potential. You know, it's like what I said, you know, things like Barrage and A Murder of Crows and Serpent Sting just feel a bit sort of vestigial, right? It's like they were historically hunter things, but, you know, they don't necessarily always play great with marksmanship. I think, though, an example of the opposite, and a great Shadowlands edition, though, is the new version of an old classic, and that is Volley. So it rains down damage, that's really fun, but it also activates trick shots. So you can go volley, aim shot, rapid fire, and you can delete a pack of mobs. It is so fun to line those things up. It's a really good high point. Otherwise, though, I mean, man, to me, I think their 15 and 45 tiers are a bit bland. I think the others are just okay. You know, Volley is great because it's tied into the core spec mechanics. So I would just love to see things that maybe impact the precise shots mechanic a little bit more. You know, an example of something good is maybe the choice between steady focus, where 2 back-to-back steady shots give you a haste buff, and streamline, which makes rapid fire a bit more powerful and decrease the cast time of your next aim shot. You know, I think this choice and then the one between lock and load and volley that's pretty good. But, you know, I think the rest could use some work. Double tap's one that's commonly used. I think it's cool in theory. It essentially doubles your next aim shot or rapid fire, but I really think it would feel better when it's off the GCD, and I'm actually not using it, even though it is technically BIS, because it's not that much better, and when you've got 2 unused trinkets and double shot, or double tap, then it's just a bit So overall, I just think they could do a little bit more with the talents. That said, you can totally find a talent build that, you know, is actually quite fun here. So room for an improvement, but there are some nice picks where it counts. Okay, let's do legendaries. So sadly, the current base, Serpent Stalker's Trickery, is dreadfully boring. It causes aim shot to apply Serpent Sting. that's it. You'll barely notice it in single target. But I should say that it does mean you can multi-dot with aim shot, and it does mean that you can also do that with lock and load, which is a little bit more neat if you try to actively play around it. For others though, Eagle Talon's True Focus causes True Shot to also reduce the cost of abilities by 50%. Now that essentially means that you can use your precise shots more during True Shot, which actually would feel pretty great. It would make True Shot really hit like a truck, but it's not sort of currently mega used. And then there's also Secrets of the Unblinking Vigil. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, hey, free aim shots when you get trick shots, that would feel awesome. But it's currently very, very, very AoE. Surging Shots then is just, a free damage buff and a rapid fire CD, which, I'd say certainly once we can maybe wear 2 legendaries, using the lock and load talent and another could be kind of fun. But for me overall, I just think that Serpent Stalkers is not the most interesting thing. I think some of the others are a bit more fun, but here we are, I guess. Now, of course, Soulforge Embers is a choice. It's not competitive here, though, like it is for BM currently. Overall, for the legendaries, I would say there's decent choices, but the winner is a little bit dull for my particular tastes because, I just would like to see more interplay between the spec mechanics. That said, if you're really playing with an eye to multi-dot with it, then you could find quite a bit more fun. Okay, let's talk pros and cons. So, you've got fantastic single target and AoE damage that's also very bursty. That does put a lot of control in your hands where, you really can pool your resources and use them when you need them. Now, obviously, that burst comes at the expense of smoothness, but yeah, they can burst out damage when they need to, and that can be really, really useful. Also, mobility. It's not as good as BM, but it is still really good. Their survivability kit's also pretty great, their utility's pretty great. Tell you what, they just fit general WoW gameplay super, super, super well, and I think the beta tweaks really, really paid off. It's hard to think of a major downside here. This is just a great spec, and even if it was nerfed down to being middle of the road, like how Beast Mastery is right now, I would still say that it's a pretty great to play spec. Obviously, there are some bits with rooms for improvement, but I think the general style here, yeah, it gets a thumbs up. I actually am surprised how much some tweaking of focus values, doing the Hunter's Mark change and revamping True Shot, how much that has actually impacted my enjoyment of this spec. Okay, Survival Hunter. Look, I've just got to level with you here. Survival is, in terms of play rates, literally the least played spec in the game. It also is a spec that got no changes for this expansion from BFA. Blizzard just didn't put the work in, and I guess that's why we're not really going to either. This is very likely, I think, because Blizzard saw how Survival was very, very, very rarely played. I mean, as of the time of writing, it has 3,500 Nathrian normal parses versus 96,000 for BM and 212k for MM, and expect that trend to continue. It can still do, decent enough damage, though, and it's just that thing where it's been barely played and barely changed. I actually do think it's quite fun with a few of its talents, but again, it's just, you don't gain that much from going melee. And it's not changed from BFA. And that actually means that my BFA beta spec review for this one holds up one-to-one to my thoughts today, so I'm not going to bother rehashing it, to be honest, because there's just not that much to say. Also, I think given how little attention Blizzard has put into this, I would find it hard to recommend that somebody switches to playing it. I would think that given the really low player numbers, chances are there's going to be a rework, so even if you did play this and really latched onto it, I think it would be taken away from you via rework. Why is that? Well, I think it's because most people see Hunter as a ranged class. I think they don't have an interest in what SV is right now, and I think that's very different to the past ranged incarnations of SV, which I think players would actually rather see return. That's the Survival Hunter situation. I think it's definitely a bit of a black sheep. Okay, let's talk Covenants. Right now, the vast majority of people are going Night Fae, who get Wild Spirits. It is simple. You slap a big circle in the floor. Anything in that circle takes extra damage whenever you do a spell. Do you know what? Yeah, it's pretty satisfying. You're doing your trick shots, your volley, and you're seeing all these sort of astral things come down and damage people. Satisfying as hell. I enjoy it a lot in almost all content. As for the Kyrian's Arrow, it's fun enough. I mean, it lets you shoot through walls, which is pretty neat once it actually gets people, but in general use, you slap it down, you enjoy its 30% crit. I do think Wild Spirits is a bit more fun, and to be honest with you, for both MM and BM, I actually prefer having a big 2-minute cooldown that's super, super powerful than a less powerful but 1-minute cooldown. So that's what I prefer. Now, over for the Venthyr, I think that Flayed Shot's kind of cool, but it doesn't really work out that well. Basically, it's a dot, and each tick of it can proc a kill shot. And I do think it's neat in how it meshes with general moment-to-moment Hunter gameplay, but it sure just does lack the versatility of the Carrion and Night Fae abilities, which are kind of good for all situations. Then finally, the Necrolord Death Chakram. I mean, it's also a neat enough idea, you know? Throw it out, deal some damage, get some focus. Yeah, pretty decent. Like with Flayed Shot, it's also just neat having something that you're using very, very moment to moment with your Hunter gameplay, but it's just that thing where Necrolords aren't that great for Hunter overall. It's just, I guess it's weird enough, you know, it's just how it is with Covenants. For most classes, there's 1 or 2 Covenants that are a bit more used, and then 1 or 2 that are very much not used. And it's just the Night Fae and Kyrian are the more used ones. And at that, I would say that because they're essentially your default choices, they are offering you a really great experience. I think their abilities do fit content really quite well. I think the others are neat, but they're not really great if you want to do super competitive gameplay. But that said, if you're doing this purely for your own personal RP, yeah, they're both cool enough and you'll probably be fine. Just don't expect to be going into a Mythic Plus dungeon that's real, you know, real sweaty with your Flayed Shot and for people to be super happy about it. Blizzard must have known, though, that neither the Necrolord or Venthyr ones would be super common picks, and they did let it just go like that, but here we are. Odd, but that is just something that's happened with every spec in the game. I suppose I'll also just say that I do think that, you know, the abilities do just fit into the Hunter spec gameplay quite well on live for both MM and BM. I've really enjoyed Wild Spirits in both of those, and additionally, you know, being a Hunter and having Soul Shape, man, your movement is just incredible. It's bonkers. So there you go. That's the Covenant situation. And as for soul binds, there's never a soul bind that's going to be like the reason why you play something. There might be via, you know, the balance numbers, but in terms of something to care about, like if it's exciting and fun, nah. So to conclude this, I think that MM and BM Hunter are in a really great spot. I think that their talents could be a lot more interesting in both cases, but for now they do the job fine. For both specs, right, your moment-to-moment gameplay does feel, they feel unique as compared to each other, and they both mesh with the World of Warcraft gameplay experience really well. You'll never feel like you're fighting your specs kit when you're actually doing the game's content. They're just such solid workhorses, all-rounders, they can do it all, and you'll feel capable. And while not mega fun, or mega high up the fun scale, outside of when you're really on a roll with your trick shots, they're just those solid, dependable workhorses where I think you'll get a lot out of them. Certainly, I think that blasting out an incredible combustion or a really big Rat Paladin burst combo is more fun, but man, even if my heart isn't always pounding, I always feel capable, and I never feel like, ugh, being a hunter is so annoying right now. So yeah, I mean, hey, also, if you're a raider, they also really let you focus in on Blizzard's boss mechanics. So as a raider, I really like that because boss mechanics, you know, they'll change every 6 months with every new raid that we get, and it really lets you focus in on that. Really then, to cap it off, it's just a pity that SV is essentially dead in terms of how often it's played. I would love to see a rework there. You know, MM and BM both feel so different to each other that there's bound to be another, like, good playstyle for a ranged hunter. Certainly was in the past. But there you go. That is the Hunter class review. You know, Hunters are in a great spot. I think that Blizzard do have room for improvement, but I really find it hard to see somebody sort of seeing this video, getting a feel for what a Hunter is, picking Hunter, and then begrudging that decision. So that's really where I'm going to leave it. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it useful. And with that said, what is your main right now? How are you enjoying it? What are the pros and cons? Let me know down below. Thank you for watching. There'll be more videos like this in the future, and I'll see you next time.